Good morning YouTube, my name's Richard and you're watching Lawfulness Smithy off-grid. Now, a question I was asked a few weeks ago, a young lad came to visit me and he was asking me about planning permission for hard standing for a yard. Now basically the situation that had happened was he'd bought some agricultural land, he'd used the prior approval and prior notification process in Scotland to apply for an agricultural building. Now, he'd gone to an architect rather than doing it himself, and the architect had put the application in, made a bit of a mess of it. Planning officers came out and refused it on the basis that he didn't have a holding number and it wasn't a small holding or a farm, so he got refused. But in the meantime, he'd gone on, like he'd jumped the gun, and he'd hardcored quite a large area of the land he'd bought with, quarried rock off a local farmer. But he was a bit worried that he would have to remove that and put it back to a field because, somebody had told him basically that he needed planning permission for it. And what he was worried about, the planning department had come out and the planning officer hadn't mentioned it. He was worried he was going to get a letter later. Now, I didn't know the definitive answer at the time. I know quite a bit about planning permission, agricultural buildings, certificate of lawfulness is this sort of thing. But I didn't know the definitive answer to this. The only experience I'd really had with this is 20 years ago. We'd bought a dairy farm in southwest Scotland and we put cow tracks in. Now, we spoke to the planning department, we didn't get a lot of answers off them. And we had got like a New Zealand dairy consultant at the time helping us move to block calving, paddock system, that sort of stuff. And they looked into it and we didn't need any sort of planning permission, permitted development rights to put these cow tracks in. So we proceeded and we did get reported to the planning department and nothing happened. One of our neighbours didn't like it and they reported us. The planning officers came out, had a bit of a look and said, no, you don't need any sort of permission. So I've looked into this. There's not many videos out there on YouTube. There's not much information on Google. So basically, to start off with, if you're putting a track around your farm, if you're making a new entrance onto a public road or the first 25 metres, you need to apply for planning permission for that. You also maybe need a permit off the council for opening onto that road, and it would be up to the council how you open onto that road. Quite often they'll insist that the first 6 foot of your roadway going up to your gateway is tarmac, etc. And they might insist on them doing it, joining into the carriageway and charging you. So if you're making a completely new access, you need to apply for planning permission and possibly like a road opening permit. You would have to contact the council. If you've got an existing gateway and you've got an existing track for the first 25 metres, then you can proceed and put tracks around your farm up to half a hectare. Now you would have to measure the width and the length of these tracks and work out your area. If it was more than half a hectare, you could use your permitted development rights. Most farms have permitted development rights for up to 1,000 square metres of either hard standing tracks or an agricultural building. So if you've not used your permitted development rights in the last 2 years and they're intact, most of the UK you've got permitted development rights of 1,000 square metres, so you can use them, put your application in and do your tracks. Now, it's up to you how you proceed. Personally, I would probably use my half a hectare first and then apply for permitted development for the rest. Now, the same goes for hard standing. So if you're looking at making an isolated yard, if you're looking at putting hardcore down for say a handling facility for sheep or cattle at a bit of ground you've got, the same applies. As long as it's 25 metres away from the public road, as long as you're not making a new opening or you're not hardcore in the first 25 metres, then you can do up to half a hectare of yard. Now it needs to be a permeable, non-bound surface. So you can't use road planings, you can't use tarmac, and you can't use concrete. If you were to do it out of any of those, you'd need to put in planning permission to do that. So you can make a new yard, you can extend your existing yard up to half a hectare. Again, the same applies, can't be concrete, can't be road planings. A lot of people get confused about this, and they do use road planings because they're readily available. Quite often you're getting them cheap, but you can't use them from the outset. Now, you can go from an existing yard, so if you've already got a yard or your existing yard is hardcore, you can go from that to concrete without a planning application. You can just do it. Where we can't find any information whatsoever is how long you've got to leave it between hardcoring a yard and then concreting it or putting road planings or tarmac down. There doesn't seem any information anywhere. I've even asked a planning officer and they can't answer that. So, but you can't go from a grass field straight to a concrete yard without planning permission. You'd have to apply for planning permission, and all sorts of things would come into that, like drainage, surface water runoff, catchment tanks, So if you're trying to do it, the best thing is to do a small area like half a hectare first. Do it with your own quarried stone, like crushed concrete, that sort of stuff. One thing, a word of caution I would say, if you're importing material to do this, make sure you get tickets for it. So don't let builders dump crap on your land, or else you're going to come into a whole load of trouble. Up here it would be SEPA, Environment Agency. Make sure if you're buying the stuff in, you're either buying it off a quarry or even buying it off like a skip hire company, but you're getting a ticket for that stuff, that it is crushed concrete, it is proper recycled aggregates, that it's not getting tipped there, You don't need any sort of license, or they would make you dig it up basically. Now, what happens if you hardcore half a hectare and it's not for the purposes of agriculture? Well, basically, you should get planning permission for it. It does seem quite common, I've seen it quite a lot, where builders etc, people basically buy hard standing off farmers and they use it as a builder's yard, fence around it. Now, that needs planning permission, not for the hard standing, but for the change of use. So you would need planning permission to change the use, because you're changing a category, basically, in the planning system. Now, what happens if, say, a builder buys half a hectare or buys an acre of hard standing, like a farmyard, and they don't change the use? Well, that would come into like the 10-year rule. So you could apply for a certificate of lawfulness if you basically use that hard standing as like a builder's yard, as an industrial yard. If you fenced it and you can prove that you've used it without getting planning permission. If you do that for 10 years, you can apply for a certificate of lawfulness, and they're fairly easy to get in this instance. If you've got photos, like if you're a builder and you've bought that land, you'll have your title deeds proving that you've bought it. And basically, after 10 years, you can apply for a certificate of lawfulness. Now, this seems to be quite common. I've seen it like on the British Farming Forum on Facebook, etc. People asking like, how are these people getting planning permission for houses in the open countryside? Or what they're doing is they're buying up hard standing buildings, stuff that you couldn't convert into a house, and then what they're doing is they're basically making it into a yard, dumping crap on it, diggers, breeze blocks, making it into a yard, doing it for 10 years. They're getting a certificate of lawfulness for it to be a different class use, like a builder's yard, industrial site. That then means they can apply for planning permission to build buildings, or they can apply for planning permission. Quite a lot of local authorities, they favour changing industrial land to housing. So this is where you see like a bit of yard out in the open countryside, and then after a few years you end up with 3 random modern looking houses turning up that you wonder how the hell did they get planning permission. So this is the route that people are going down. They're buying hard standing, you know, they're buying yards, and they're not applying for planning permission because they wouldn't get planning permission. You know, it'd be quite rare for like a builder to get planning permission to change some hard standing in open countryside to a builder's yard, because the planners know the game that's getting played here. So in that instance, you would need planning permission. If you didn't get planning permission and you get away with it for 10 years, then you could apply for a certificate of lawfulness. And once you've got the certificate of lawfulness, then that is industrial land and it's no longer green belt, and then people can apply for planning permission to build houses on it. The same, a lot of people get confused about gypsy and traveller sites, and this is quite a contentious issue. Now, a lot of gypsies and travellers buy yards, buy small areas of hard standing. You know, there's one going on not that far away from here just now, and what it was a local waste transfer station. It's only about half an acre. It was hard standing. They've imported materials, put a big chalet on it, a few caravans. Now, they don't need planning permission for like the hard standing. It was already hard standing. They've raised the level, and the planners have basically served notice on them, and they've asked what they've put in there. They've asked where that stuff's come from. Now they know the guy that's applied, well, the guy that's got caught for living on it, they know he's a roofer, so they're presuming that he's dumped like roofing tiles, slates and stuff that should have gone into landfill. So, but he's not really in trouble for creating the yard. What it is a change of use. So it's change of use from one class use to another. Now that was already industrial land because it was a waste transfer station, but the planners have basically served notice on him, and he's put retrospective planning permission for residential, because as soon as you live on that land, it's residential. So I know this is really complicated. I know it's quite a complicated subject, but the agricultural part of this, so if you've got a proper farm or a proper small holding with an agricultural holding number, and you have your permitted development rights intact, then all the things I discussed at the start of this video are fairly easy to do, as long as you're away from a public road, not making a new entrance onto a public road or a new gateway. Then, you know, you can do tracks up to half a hectare, a yard of up to half a hectare, or if you've got an existing yard or hard standing, feed lot, you know, handling facilities, a place you've been storing around bales, you can change that from hard standing to concrete. You probably do need to think, if you concrete it or you put road planings down, what you're going to do with that surface runoff, because that's a different subject, you know what I mean? Like, although you don't need planning permission to change it, if you create a lot of pollution or surface runoff, then that'll be down to SEPA or the Environment Agency. So I hope all this made sense, and you can probably see what I'm up to in the background. Got 2 diggers here and we're digging out a bigger yard. So if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you've got any questions, drop us a comment down below. I'll try and put some links into the description. There's not a lot of information out here about this. You know, I've struggled to find information about it. Maybe it's because the planners don't want you to know. But give us a thumbs up, drop us a comment, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. All that really helps, like the YouTube algorithm, it helps us grow. Now, on my main channel, there's a section I've done, so I've got a group of videos about planning permission, permitted development, that sort of stuff. So I've done one on Class Q, I've done one on the 4-year and 10-year rule for the certificate of lawfulness, and there's a few other videos going on. So jump on those videos, have a look, hopefully they're helpful, and hopefully you enjoyed this, and we'll see you again on the next one, folks. Right, thank you, goodbye.